everybody. Welcome my dear friend Desi Garcia.
Thank you.
She has a wonderful podcast called Candle in a Dark Room. We met at an Unleash event
Mhm.
I was on a speakers panel with some incredible women, and that's when I met you and got to hear a little bit about your story. But then we became friends, and I got to really learn more about you. And you are such a warrior. You are such an inspiration. You are the definition of triumphant, and I just can't wait for you to share your story. It is a heavy story, and I love the fact that we're breaking the silence, and I love the fact that you continuously break the silence. And I'm going to let you take it away and share your story with everybody, and then I have a couple
Okay.
questions for you.
Yeah, so I'll kind of just start from the beginning. So my parents, I grew up in kind of my first years of life, my parents were married, and it was a very toxic relationship. My dad had been through abuse when he was younger, so he had a lot of anger and didn't know how to really handle it. So him and my mom's relationship was very just toxic. I saw a lot of things I shouldn't have seen when I was younger. And so that was already just really intense. When I was 6 years old, him and my mom finally got divorced. My mom ended up meeting a man about a year later. My mom got remarried when I was around 7 years old. And, he was very different from anything I was used to. Tattoos, kind of hardcore. He had been in and out of jail, just kind of had a rough, life apparently growing up. But I don't remember ever feeling instantly uncomfortable with him. But then he moved in pretty quickly. And that is when things kind of changed. I remember that feeling of not feeling safe with him. I locked him out one time when my mom was at work. I locked him out of the apartment and turned up Lion King really loud. And I was 7 years old. And then from there, it kind of just got worse. And then when I was 8 years old, it progressed to he started molesting me. And that eventually changed to I was being fully sexually abused from the age 8 to 15. It was every single day almost. He would pick me up from school, check me out of school, tell me I had doctor's appointments. And then I'd go back to school, and then he'd drop me back off at school, and I would just have to continue my day. He was very physically abusive and mentally abusive as well. I was told, I was threatened. Had a knife held in my throat. I would be suffocated. He would punch me so hard, my ribs were broken. Things like that you would think were noticeable, but he was very good at keeping it hidden. I was kind of older, so my mom didn't really see me undressed or anything like that. So a lot of times she didn't see bruises, but when she did, I made up a lot of excuses. Oh, I got in a fight, or I fell in the playground, or, I kind of just would make up excuses. He made it very clear that I was to not tell anybody. My dad was actually a detective, cop at the time, and then turned into a detective. And so that was always really scary for me because I knew eventually my dad was going to figure it out because this is what he did. And so I kind of started to, because my dad and my relationship was already kind of rocky, I kind of really started pushing my dad away. I didn't feel comfortable going to his house because, again, I was just too worried that he would figure something out. So mine and my dad's relationship kind of got really strained during that time. I went a really long time without seeing him, things like that. So eventually when I was 15, I had kind of just had it. I had tried already committing suicide. I had tried hanging myself. I had overdosed. I was a cutter. I had bulimia. Just really, really intense self-destruction. I just was self-harm.
I hate hearing these things because I love you so much.
Thank you. But yeah, I remember the feeling of just being done. And one night, we had just gotten a house, and him and my mom had just built a house. And I remember our house was kind of shaped like a U, and my room was on one side, and my mom and his room was on the other. And I remember I had finally gotten my mom to get a lock on my door. I had begged her for one, and she didn't think I was old enough. And here I was at 15. I finally was able to get one. I hid a key at my best friend's house, and then I kept the keys somewhere hidden. And so that way he would never have access to it because I knew I couldn't have one that would be able to be picked. And so, that night I remember on the other side of the door hearing him trying to pick the lock, and he couldn't. And then I remember him saying, "Open the effing door. Open the door." He was whispering it. And I remember just sitting there, and I don't think I took a breath for hours. I just sat there and I just prayed and prayed and just was like, I can't go through this anymore. I just had it. And so that next morning, I remember I got up. I don't think I slept that night. And I ran to school as fast as I could. And I got to school and told my friend who had actually recently had come out that she had been molested by somebody in her family. And I told her what had been happening. And she said, okay, let's go tell Miss so-and-so. She was one of our teachers. And I had already been really close to her. She's the one who, after I had tried hanging myself, I had a rope burn around my neck. And when I went to school, it was obviously noticeable. I tried to cover it. I had long hair, but she noticed it. She would notice my cuts, things like that. So she had already tried calling the suicide hotline for me. She had tried doing a bunch of things already for me. But she knew it was something was going on at home, but she didn't know what. So she also didn't want to get my parents too involved because she was scared it would get me in more trouble. Because she obviously didn't realize it wasn't my mom. And so, yeah, she ended up reporting it. A detective came. I finally was free, quote unquote. He wasn't arrested right away. They didn't have proof. So I kind of, for a couple weeks, literally thought I was going to be murdered. Like, I remember that thought of like, he's going to kill me. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, he's going to kill me. He's actually he's actually the father of my little brother. And so that was always something that was really hard for me because I remember that guilt of I ruined our family. I split our family up. I took my brother's dad away. And obviously now I've come to realize that like that wasn't my fault. But in that moment, that's what I put that blame on myself. So yeah, obviously seeing my mom cry herself to sleep for many years, like it was really hard. So yeah, I ended up going to court, tried to testify. I was not able to testify. Luckily, the judge came up to me, and after I had ran out of the courtroom because I was just too emotional, she said, I want you to watch me put him away. The man who hurt you, I want you to watch me put him away. And what was their name? The Bikers Against Child Abuse was there, and they sat there with me, and they were amazing, and that's how they became part of my story. And he ended up getting sentenced to 3 to life. 3 years, obviously, is not really long for what happened. At the time, and this goes into my mental health story, so I'll explain this. At the time, I had no idea when the abuse had started. I told the detectives, I think it was like 10 or 11, I had no idea. It had been happening for as long as I could remember, but I had no recollection of when it had started. And so, from as long as I can remember, I can only remember very little bits and pieces of my childhood from when I was 8 or younger. I have like 2 memories of when my parents were married. I just don't have very much memory of that time. I think I blocked it out. And so he only got 3 years, and he ended up being in there for a total of 10 years, but it was because he got attempted murder of his cellmate. He, I guess, tried to kill him or something. And so then after I got him into prison, I was 15 years old, like I said, and I ended up in a residential treatment program. I lived in a residential treatment program for 2 years. It was, I don't know if some people might know Primary Children's Hospital. It's a huge hospital where people from all over the U.S. come to bring their kids for cancer, things like that. Well, also was the top mental facility for children. Like I said, I lived there for 2 years on and off. When I wouldn't be living there, I would be in day treatment, and then I would relapse and end up back, in residential. So that went on for 2 years straight. And during that time, I was diagnosed with many different things. So PTSD, major anxiety, major depression, and the biggest one is dissociation disorder. Well, the technical term is dissociation identity disorder. And a lot of people
I've never really heard about, to this extent.
Yeah. A lot of people, I think, mix it up because most people who have DID have multiple personalities. So it's very common. I remember Oprah did something years ago with this woman who had like 97 identities. And it was because she had DID. And so that's how her brain and her body would cope, would be going into these different personalities. Yeah. That was not the case for me. I've never had multiple personalities, but I definitely would. So I don't know if you ever watched That's So Raven, where she kind of would like go off into space and then like, have her vision. That's how, yeah, that's how I would picture it. I would kind of just be sitting there, and then I would go off into a zone, is the way people have explained it to me. And then I would, hours of my day would go missing. and I would come out of it and people would tell me. So basically what would happen is I would go back to being whatever age I was. So I'd go back to being 8, 9, 10, whatever it was, and I would reenact incidents of my abuse. So I would go back to being 8 years old, and when I was 8, I couldn't say my R's. And so I would talk like I was like an 8-year-old. And I would be like, where's my mom? Like, where is she? Where's, so he's trying to hurt me. And then I would lay on the ground and physically think that he was on top of me. My therapist said I would turn blue. I would come out of it and I would physically hurt all in my body as if something had just happened to me. My bones would hurt. I would turn, like I said, blue. I would lose my breath. Just so many different things would happen because I thought that it happened. My brain thought it was happening again. So I would, yeah, it would happen. Well, at one point, because it took a minute for it to kind of come to surface, what DID does is it comes when you're in a safe place. So once I started therapy, it started to really come up. And that's when they realized, okay, how old are you? And I would say, oh, I'm 9. And then it came, I'm 8. And that's when they realized it had started when I was 8 years old. So yeah, it would happen. I don't know if every single day, but it definitely happened so regularly that it actually got to the point where they sat my mom down and said, she'll never be normal. She'll be in mental hospitals for the rest of her life. She is mentally gone she's basically in psychosis and she'll never be normal. And I remember my therapist telling me that they didn't think I could ever drive a car because when I was 8, I couldn't drive, obviously. So they were scared, like if I was driving and I had a dissociation episode, I'd be 8 and I'd crash because I wouldn't know what I was doing. And so, yeah, they didn't think I would live a normal life. And I was there for those 2 years. I was on, you name it, and I was on that medication. At some point, they thought I had, because they didn't know what dissociation was, they actually diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder and then bipolar. Once they figured out it was dissociation, they ended up, obviously fixing that. But they had to call a doctor from California to actually diagnose me because they had never seen it to this extent before.
Wow. Yeah, that story, when you told me that right here at this table, your podcast, I think we talked about it before or after. I don't know if we went into it during my interview, but I was so blown away. And this is why I'm so grateful that you do share your story and that that you came on today to this series to share your story, because I know that there's so many people that are dealing with this and they don't know, like you didn't know for years, how to get out of it. And they feel like they feel shame for something that they should never feel ashamed for. It's not your fault. And somebody is robbing you of your childhood. The words I have are not for this series. Rage when I think of this, and I think of you, and I think of other little girls or little boys or people, men, women that are dealing with this. But yeah, I wanted you to come on because I had never heard of that disorder, and I'm so proud of you and grateful that you're sharing it, because I think many people are unaware of disorder and I think people are aware of the extent of what abuse and sexual abuse and assault can do. But I'm so thankful that you're such an open book when it comes to this, and because you don't realize how many lives, I'm sure, well, maybe you do, that you're saving and changing. And I love the work you do with Candle in a Dark Room. Thank you. It's so crazy to me because you had reached out to me about coming on this series. That's how incredible you are about wanting to story and wanting to take this I don't even know what to call it, more than a negative, and turn it into some form of a positive by helping people by using these platforms. But it's so crazy because you had reached out right as somebody had DM'd me. I had asked, what do you guys want to hear about? And somebody had said, I'd love for you to bring somebody on, or if you know anything about the PTSD of sexual assault victims and rape victims, and how they overcome it, or how they overcame it, and how they got their body confidence back and their mental confidence and confidence in general after going through something like that. And if you're comfortable, I'd love to hear how, because I know that you've flourished and you are such an incredibly strong, you're one of the strongest people I've met. You exude so much and light and strength and all that. And I'd love for you to share how you've gotten there. And I'm sure you still battle with certain things, but for people who are going through this or have how you've began to overcome it, how you have overcome it, how you still are, if you are overcoming it, if there's any tactics, or, I mean, I would love for you to share, because I can only imagine.
So, the thing with trauma is I think a lot of people don't realize that how much trauma affects the brain and the body. And I believe that we hold trauma within our bodies. So a lot of times when people have been through trauma, they deal with it by drugs, alcohol, things internally, because they don't know how to deal with it. Their body doesn't know how to deal with it. And especially because, a lot of times the way my body dealt with it is with dissociation, but sometimes people don't do that, and instead they hold it internally. Like I said before, my dad was abused as a child, and my dad just died in February of stomach cancer. And randomly, like, he just all of a sudden got sick, and within a year he was gone, 48 years old. And it just happened so quickly. And I personally believe it's because he never dealt with his trauma. And then he became a detective, a cop for one of the most busiest cities here in Utah, and saw more trauma. So he constantly held this trauma and never dealt with this PTSD. So yeah, I think
your body like that, your health.
Yep, exactly. And I interviewed this doctor. His name's Dr. Bill, and he runs a trauma center here in Utah. And he has been working in trauma for years. And he's like, I have seen people's livers shut down. I'm 27 years old. I've seen bodies shut down because of the trauma. What happened to me also was when I was 15, right after I reported what happened, before I went into treatment, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So I deal with type 1 diabetes, which is juvenile diabetes, which I got when I was 15, which is very rare because most people get it when they're, 6 or younger. And so I believe it was because, again, my trauma I had held for so long just eventually had to come out in some way. And that's how it came out, was through my body. I have almost literally died at least 3 times. I went into diabetic ketoacidosis. I got swine flu really bad and almost died and was in the hospital for days. I mean, I've had so many different things happen because my immune system doesn't work like it's supposed to. And I believe it's because of the trauma I've been through. So, being in treatment it saved my life. I met my old therapist there who has still stuck by me. She actually died a week after my dad. Was super hard because obviously that was already traumatizing, losing my dad. And then I lost the person that I would go to deal with it. So she passed away, but she was my rock. I mean, I would call her day or night. She, she's what a therapist should be, is what it comes down to. And she worked with me. She called doctors to diagnose me. I mean, she fought tooth and nail for me to become normal. When I got out of there, I ended up leaving, and I'm not exaggerating. I left with a freezer bag full of medication that I had to take daily to keep my sanity. And I ended up meeting my husband as soon as I got out. I moved to New Mexico, and that is kind of where things started changing. What I've learned that's helped me is not what helped me. What I did first is I really did good at putting a mask on. I swept it under the rug. And this is why, for me, it's been so important to do Candle in a Dark Room, because I don't want people to do the same thing I did. For 10 years, I buried it, and I didn't talk about what happened to me. If you would have met me a couple years ago, you never would have known this happened to me. Nobody who was in my circle knew this had happened to me. The only people that knew were my childhood friends and my family. But yeah, so, after I came out with what happened, I'm going to kind of backtrack. There's a couple things that happened that I want to raise awareness for, just because it happens all the time. After I went back to school, and I tried to go back to school, and people started finding out what had happened. And I don't know how, but obviously, news spreads and people found out what had happened to me. Well, this girl that I had fought a couple of times, she was a very mean girl. I mean, you just picture a movie that she's the mean girl, and that's who she was. I was
bully.
Yes, she was a bully. Exactly. And, the way you asked me earlier when we were messaging that, how did I deal with my body confidence and all that? So when I was in 7th grade, my eating disorder started. I watched that movie with Tracy Gold where she talks about her eating disorder. And instead of getting the effect I should have got, which means, don't have an eating disorder, I got the opposite of, oh, this is a great idea. This is genius. I'm going to do this. And so I started coping in that way. I, obviously lost weight quickly, but I started to not care about my looks because in my head, I remember writing in my journal and having this thought, if I look disgusting, he won't want me. If I just look gross, then he won't want to hurt me anymore. He won't want anything to do with me. So I just need to I need to not take care of myself so that way he leaves me alone. And so I would just put my hair in a ponytail. I didn't put makeup on. I, didn't wash my hair. I didn't take care of my hygiene because I didn't care at the time. I danced and stuff and I did things like that. But for the most part, I was very antisocial. I had like my couple friends my one friend who I'm still best friends with since we were in 4th grade. And other than that, I just kind of kept to myself. In school, girls would call me chubby. Girls would say that I stuffed. All these things. I remember starting my period at 10 years old and I got bullied till I was blue in the face that I stuffed my bra until I finally flashed them in the girls' bathroom because I was like, look, I do not stuff. Here you go. Here's the proof. Yeah, I handled that really well. But so yeah, girls and boys were really mean to me. And boys, I remember all I wanted was to be accepted. I just wanted to be the cool girl. And so again, like my body, I needed to lose the weight. So I started getting worse with my eating disorder and obviously it didn't stop the abuse. And I realized that. So then at the end, towards the end, before I started becoming very sexually active. And then when I went to treatment, when I would come home, I would be very sexually active because I remember the thought of, I'm damaged anyway. It doesn't matter what I do. So who cares what I do with boys? And I did so many things that now I'm like, why would I do that to myself? But it was because that was the worth that people put on me all the time, was that I wasn't good enough. That girl, as soon as I came back to school after I reported it, I remember she yelled in the hallway, Desi likes to have sex with her dad. And she yelled it in the middle of between classes as loud as she could. The entire 8th grade class stopped and looked at me and I was mortified. And she just said, Desi likes to have sex with her dad. And that was it. I left school and I shortly went into treatment after that because I just couldn't handle it anymore. So the way I've, learned how to cope slowly, I've learned that not to hold it in. So a couple of years ago when my old stepdad ended up being released from prison, obviously my world turned upside down. And because I had masked it for so long and never dealt with it, it all came back like a wave again. And my eating disorder started kicking back in. I started realizing like I was self-destructing again. I had just had my daughter and I just remember being so upset that like now he just gets to walk and live a normal life and that's not fair because now I have to walk around and worry that I'm going to run into him somewhere. And so I started I started therapy again, excuse me. And, that was one of the best decisions I made. I remember when I was 17 and lived in New Mexico, I took my last pill and I stopped my medication cold turkey. Don't do that. I'm going to tell you right now, bad thing to do. Do it slowly. But I didn't at that point. I didn't care. I stopped cold turkey and I was not on medication for 10 years. I took nothing. After my old stepdad was released, I just, put that stigma aside that medication was bad. I told myself for so long that like, I'm not crazy anymore. Like I don't need medication.
You're associating medication with the thought of your experiences
in rehab. Yep.
Rehab and I'm crazy.
Exactly.
It's very normal to sometimes need something to balance you out, especially after, such traumatic experiences.
Exactly. Especially when, you're re-traumatized. Like having your perpetrator being released from prison is one of the worst feelings that I think a survivor can feel.
It makes me so angry. That is the system just failing you and it makes me so angry.
Exactly. And I'll tell you what I'm doing, because of that now to help with that. But first, I started just kind of doing therapy and working on myself. And I remember one day, I remember being younger and always thinking like, I'm religious, I'm Christian, and I've always believed like to pray and things like that. And I remember praying to be like, there has got to be a reason that God put me through this. There's got to be a purpose in this. Like, I can't just be another number in this. Like, what am I supposed to do? And I always felt pushed, but I kind of remember thinking like, okay, I'll do something one day and kind of pushing it aside. And finally, when he was released, I remember that fire burning inside of me after I was re-triggered. After I got past that, I remember being like, no, I'm going to do something about this. And so I talked to my husband And I thought about doing a blog, and then I thought about doing a book. And so I've tried all these things. But nothing kind of resonated, like nothing felt right. And then my husband actually came up to me and he's like, babe, what if you start a podcast? I had never listened to podcasts before, which is kind of weird, but I never had. And I was like, okay, what exactly does that mean? Looked into it, went and bought a little snowball mic and literally just like started doing it. And I released my first episode, which was the first part of my story. So on my podcast, the first, second, and then the number 8 episode is my story. Number 1 and 2 is my story all the way up until recently. And I released my first episode, and my first episode got to like 2,500 follower listeners or whatever within the first like week of it being released. And I was like, wait, what in the heck? Like, I did not expect that. I remember just thinking like, okay, it's just going to be my circle. It's more for me to just put my story out there so I don't feel like I'm holding it anymore. Yeah. Never in a million years did I think it was going to turn into what it has.
I think that's just, sorry to cut you off, just
no, you're fine.
Out there, because I think that's such an important thing to know. And I talk about this often, and I've learned myself because I've started doing this in the past year, just talking more about things I've gone through and anxieties and panic attacks and my own thing. And there's just so much to be said about getting things out of your body and just like getting rid of that fear of just getting what you went through, because we all go through things, and it's not shaming yourself.
Exactly. Getting rid of that shame. Exactly.
Shame. And especially the unjust version of shame that someone else can plague somebody with, which is what you went through, which really, really upsets me. I mean, that type of, no one should ever feel ashamed for someone else's disgusting actions. But unfortunately.
Right. Unfortunately, it comes with kind of the situation, unfortunately.
Of the situation. But I'm just so happy you said that. Doing the podcast is really what helped you, because you're speaking out and you're getting these things out of your mind. And it's I feel like once we do that, once we find the strength to speak out, like nothing and no one can tear us down anymore, because
you literally like lift those bricks. Yep.
Just releasing it and taking away any of that feeling of shame or that we plague ourselves with, that we all do for whatever it is we go through in life, disorder, eating disorder, abuse, trauma. So I love that you said that. And I think that I'm guessing that has been one of your mechanisms is, one of your healing mechanisms is the podcast and getting things
absolutely
out and owning it, because once you get it out, I feel like it's just, I don't know, it's this feeling of no one can bring me down. No one, nothing.
Well, it's one of those things that's like, it's out there. There's no taking it back.
Throwing it away.
Yeah. And, it's those feelings of like, it's out there. There's no taking it back. Those bricks literally lifting off my shoulders. It's the best feeling of sitting here with somebody, them telling their traumatic story, and then leaving my recording room. And the feeling of relief off of their face. I mean, I've had people cry after being like, holy cow, I can't believe I just did that. I feel like I feel so great. And it's scary.
Alone. And
yes,
inspiring other people to break the silence.
Exactly.
Ever.
Exactly. And, and giving them the courage to know that like they have the power over their story now. And that is the feeling when I decided to do my podcast, yep, exactly. And when I decided to do my podcast, I was like, you know what? And I remember saying this, I think on my episode, I said, he took my childhood. I have no childhood because of him, but I will not let him take my future. I'm not going to let him affect my children. I'm not going to let anything that he's done to me affect me. And so, yeah, I started my podcast, and like I said, it just really went off from there. And like you said, that is probably the number one thing that has helped me this last year. I'll kind of update you on a couple of new things, but along with the stuff that I'm going to tell you, and then with my dad passing away, all this stuff, this year has been really hard. And people always ask me, like, how do you record like people's trauma stories and then like be okay? And again, what you asked me at the beginning was, how do I deal with it? I take care of myself. I take a step back if I need to. I take care of my mental health. I am taking antidepressant. I take one, and I don't need to take a sandwich bag full again or a freezer bag full again, but I do need to take something, and that's okay. I've been okay with that because I do feel better with it. And so I take care of myself. I go to therapy if I feel like I need to go to therapy. The biggest thing that I've said is communication. I have somebody, I have people in my life, thank goodness, that I can talk about this with. I have my Candle Darkroom girls, my, I don't know what to call them, assistant people, part of my team. One's my sister-in-law and one is a childhood friend of mine. And I text them middle of the day, you guys, I'm having a really rough day. And they know, like, Desi's serious. Like, it says, I only reach out if I need to, you know what I mean? And they know, like, hey, we need to go over there, or I'll just have like them come over and they'll bring me coffee and, you know, things like that. So having a circle, a safe circle is the number one thing. You know, even I'll just call my best friend, same thing. Or, you know, honestly, my husband, like waking up in the middle of the night, I'll wake up in tears sometimes, especially since losing my dad, and just like for no reason to start sobbing. And I have to wake him up and be like, I don't know what's wrong. I just got this overwhelming feeling of like anxiety, panic attack. I'll start having a panic attack. And then I just like cry. And he just lets me. He hugs me. He lets me know it's going to be okay. We pray, you know, things like that. Thank you. You know, yeah, we've been together for almost, we'll be 14 years. Oh my gosh, it's May now. This month will be.
That was the answer, people.
Yes, this year is going to be 13 years, of being together, and then 10 years in August of being married. And this man has been through a lot of crap with me. I mean, he should have left me a long time ago because I put him through some crap. You know, I was hard, and I admit that. Like,
that angel.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt. My family says it all the time. Like, I met him at 17 years old, right when I got out of rehab, for a reason. And I believe that God was like, yeah, look, you're going to continue to go through some crap. And if you don't have someone to stick by your side, you're not going to make it. So yeah, I talked to him. My mom and I are very close. You know, believe it or not, people, I think, question that a lot. They don't understand how my mom and I are very close. But I've had to, one, understand and forgive. I had to understand that she swears on everything that she did not know. And I have to trust her and I have to believe her. And honestly, it's come to the point where, like, I do 100% believe her. But if by chance one day she remembers something, that's between her and her higher power. And that is what she, you know, that's something that I can't carry. But I forgive my mom, and I know she was trying the best she could. She was working 3 jobs because 3 children, while married to this piece of crap that was doing drugs and other things that he was doing. So yeah, I think forgiveness is a huge part of my healing, and do not expect to do that quickly. If you just were, you know, assaulted or something like that, nobody needs to come up to you and say, one day you need to forgive them. No, it's going to take years and it's going to take time.
If no one else can tell you when or if
exactly
you. I mean, I know it's,
yep.
Because I work with people who work so heavily with sex trafficking victims.
Right.
And that's such a big thing, is the forgiveness. There's something about that sets you free.
Because it's not for them, it's for you. Mm-hmm. And that's what you have to come to terms with at some point is, I still, yeah, and don't get me wrong, I still hate that man. And I still, you know, don't wish him to come out or be here on earth at all. But I've had to come to terms and be like, you know what, that is not my choice anymore. I did what I needed to do. And now at this point, like, there's nothing else I can do. So I had to come to terms with just forgiving him. And, you know, the biggest thing is, again, he had went through abuse. He had went through a lot of stuff that was very, like, not healthy, and child abuse and stuff as well. And so is that an excuse? Absolutely not. He chose not to break the cycle, where I'm choosing to break the cycle. And he chose to go the opposite way. And that was his decision. But I do try to give a little bit of grace in that. Of, you know what, he was damaged, and so he hurt people, unfortunately. And not always. Again, it's one of the things where you choose whether or not you're going to be that person. But most of the time, the people
seek therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Go to therapy. Do what you need to do.
The other hurt people.
Yep.
It becomes this domino effect. Let's just end it. If you're hurting,
exactly,
so many outlets and so many people that can help you.
Exactly. And that's why for me, raising awareness to parents is a huge deal for me, because again, my dad saw abuse, and then he had his own issues, and then, you know, my stepdad was abused, and then he was abusive. All these things that people continue to do because they were originally abused. I had to look at my
alone in any version of the aspect.
Exactly.
I don't want to hurt alone.
Right. And I remember having to look at myself in the mirror and like one day just looking, because I was turning into a mess again after he was released. And I was just kind of letting myself go and I didn't care. And our marriage was kind of getting rocky because I didn't like want to communicate and all these things. And I remember literally looking at myself in the mirror and being like, like I have worked my ass off. I have gone way too far to let him come and take any more of my life. And so, yeah, again, taking care of yourself, being honest about it. It's okay to hurt. It is okay to feel it. It is okay. Like you've said before, and I've taken this little quote from you, you have to feel it to heal it, because it is 100% true. If you do not deal with this pain and you do not confront this pain like straight on, you will never get through this. People ask me, how did you get over your abuse? Okay, I will never get over my abuse. Anyone who has been through any type of abuse will never get over their abuse. What we have to learn is how to get through it and the tools to get through it, so that way we can live our life. Will I ever just be over it and forget what happened to me? Absolutely not. But I now know how to work through my trauma when I am triggered or when things happen. It's going to come up my whole life. But I've learned that, okay, you know what? Something happened. I was triggered. Now, what have I learned to deal with this? And so, yeah, you're never going to get over your trauma. You're never going to just forget about what happened to you. But you can definitely learn to move through your trauma. And that is the number one thing to heal.
And I love that. Absolutely. I'm so happy you said the feel it to heal it, because I was in a cycling class going through just a weird season of life. And it makes me emotional, because like that sentence did wonders for me. My spin coach, Gail, who I love, she's like a healer now, and she's so incredible and so inspirational. But I've used that, and it's resonated with so many people who have been through major hardships.
Yep.
And I just love that so much. And it is so true. And I just want to point out as well, when things do feel just so heavy, like it's just the weight of the world on your back, hang in there, guys, because as Desi can attest, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
Or there's always a candle in that dark room. There always is. And it will always be. I think that I've said, I've gone through times where I felt like just this heaviness and this darkness of anxiety or panic, whatever it may have been. And in the moment, I'm like, this will never dissipate. It's not going to. It always does. And I've had the best times of my life after that.
Right.
Like,
well, and
you become so much stronger, and you appreciate the light and the good so much more, and you learn so much, and you always come out on top.
Absolutely. And I think that's, the reason I named it Candle in Dark Room was because I remember being in the darkest of darkness and like feeling that hopelessness. But I knew that if I kept going, there had to be something. And that's what I tell people is picture yourself in the dark room in the middle of the night, but you see the little nightlight that's coming from the other room. That helps you kind of lead to where the doorway is. That is what it is like. It's like sitting in the darkest of darkness. But if you look hard enough, there's got to be some type of light coming through. And if you follow that, then eventually you're going to end up in the full light. Yeah. And that's all you have to do.
It does get better. I promise. There is nothing, I say this, I can't say it enough, that you have been through that someone else hasn't. There's nothing. And that someone else hasn't gotten through and chosen and getting through this and inspiring some people hundreds, some people thousands, some people millions of people from getting through it, working through it, no matter how hard it feels, just taking the time and also allowing yourself to tippy toe. It doesn't have to be overnight.
No, I'm 30 years old and I've been doing this since I was 15. I've literally been working through this for 15 years and I am can fully say that I am in a really good place. And do I have my bad days? Absolutely. There's things that still trigger me, all the time. But I've learned the tools to get through them. And so like you said, you have to, and this is the biggest thing is you have to choose to heal. You can sit there all the time and you have to make that decision. I was, like I said, in treatment for 2 years. It took me 2 years to get through because I was okay with being the victim. I was okay with that victim mentality. And you know what? It was okay for me to sit in that place for a while until I was ready to take ownership of my life and to take control of my life and to do the work. When you are healing through some type of trauma or bullying or whatever the situation is, you have to do the work to get better. If you're not going to just wake up one day and things are going to be better. Right. You would ask me earlier if, the whole thing with my body is I've had 2 kids, so obviously that messes with your body. But I've learned to appreciate my body. My body has been through trauma. My body has been through, all different kinds.
Warrior.
All different types of abuse. Yes, all different types of abuse. I had an emergency C-section. I almost lost my daughter. I had regular birth. I've done so many different things with my body. And yes, do I still have a hard time? I have, especially having an eating disorder. People who know that, who have one or have been through one, know that unfortunately with an eating disorder, it never goes away completely. It is something we have to battle every single day. People who have drug and alcohol problems, they can avoid that. They can avoid drugs and alcohol and not be around people who do those things. Food is in our everyday life, so we have to face it every single day. So when I have those thoughts, I just have to remember, okay, I am beautiful the way I am. I was made the way I am perfectly. I was, there's no reason why I should hate myself or my body. Yeah, there's times where I'm like, all right, I've eaten like crap. I need to get on the bandwagon and, make healthier choices. Decision. Right. But exactly. But but to kill yourself over your body, to kill your body, we have to remember our body is our house. If we don't take care of it, then it is literally going to fall apart. And it took me many years to realize that I wasn't taking care of my body.
I just had Haley Hasselhoff on and we were talking about that. She's like, and I was on her Redefine You IGTV series. And actually, I think that's where we first talked about it. Mm-hmm. She's like, Cassie, your body is your vessel. Because I was telling her to suffer with just issues of just feeling like I always needed to look a very specific way due to character played, or being viewed a certain way at 18 years old and feeling like I had to always look that same way, and just beating myself up over food or exercise or we just have to realize our bodies are going to always change, and that's the most beautiful part about it.
Right.
And everybody's going to age, and that's
life. I mean, it's life. It's just the way it is.
And it's just about loving every step and the evolution and everything, every stretch mark, every scar. That's something you've been through. That's a story. That's so cool. That's growing and living and having things happen and moving past them. And
it shows that you've been through things, and that's what it is.
Your body isn't a mannequin. It's a vessel.
Right.
It's not meant to sit there to just put cute clothes on it. It's meant to get you through a life.
Right.
I mean, hopefully 100 and more years of a life. Treat it
right.
well. Who cares about what that person made you feel, or that insecurity you have due to either something you put on yourself or society has made you feel, or the boyfriend or the ex-girlfriend or the mom, the dad, the sister, screw it. This is your body. This is what's going to get you through this lifetime. And this is something I preach to myself, by the way, the most, but I just didn't really, I obviously I knew that, but I didn't ever really think of it as that your body is a vessel keeping you alive.
Exactly.
It's something that you should put all this pressure on. Just love it. Treat it good. And it'll treat you really good back, I promise.
Exactly. And the last thing I wanted to say about the healing is I saw my friend sent me this quote, and this is exactly kind of how I explained it. Healing doesn't mean the damage has never existed. It means the damage no longer controls our lives. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly how I try to explain it is it doesn't mean it didn't happen, but we can choose what we do with
Absolutely.
It now.
So. You choose your future, baby. I saw this on something. You posted this at some point in time. Your past doesn't need you. Your future does.
Yeah.
Let go of the past and let's focus on the future.
There's nothing we can do to change the past now. I can go back all day long and say, well, I should have done this. I could have done that. You should have done this. But what's that going to do? That's literally could do nothing. So yeah, let's take control now and change it. Yeah.
You're going to make mistakes. And
the
beauty of life is that you can learn and it goes on. The beauty of life is that it goes on.
Well, and honestly, people ask me all the time, what would you change? And as much as I wouldn't wish this on my story on anybody, and, maybe if it was different, if I really thought about it, but when I think about it and I think about it hard, I don't think I would change anything. Yes, it was horrible, the stuff I went through, but it made me who I am today. So I don't think I would change anything, because I don't know the type of person I would have been if that wouldn't have happened to me. I wouldn't be helping people. Who knows what I would be doing. And so I appreciate what I took from my trauma. And I think that's the good thing. And that's part of the light at the end of it, is I was able to, yeah, this sucks, but you know what? It's okay. I'm going to make this into a beautiful story. And that's what I'm trying to do. And that's what I'm trying to get other people to do too.
You are the author of how that's we all are. We are the author of our story, and no one can take that from you. What would you say to somebody who's watching this, who is scared, ashamed, in fear, embarrassed to tell somebody what's going on in their life if they're being abused in any aspect? What would you tell them? Because nobody deserves that. And I know that there's so many outlets. It would be so great to hear from you, someone who's went through this, how they can get this to end, and maybe just giving them some confidence, that push that they might need to not feel afraid to take their power back and to end any abuse that they might be dealing with.
You know, the biggest thing that I always say is just speak out. But you have to find a safe place to do it, whether that's going to a school teacher, whether that's going to a church, whether it's going to somebody that you don't just, I always am very careful with who I tell people to tell, because you also want to be careful not to just tell your mom or someone close in the home, because that, or wherever, somewhere close in the circle that you're being. Exactly. And so I always say, go to an outside source, but someone that you can trust, someone that you know is going to make that phone call and is going to report. If you have to go straight to a police station, do it. I know it's scary because this person might be literally have held guns to your head, knives to your throat, whatever the situation is. But I promise you that taking that risk is going to be much better than not taking it. And honestly, most of the time, and I've talked to cops, I've talked to detectives, statistically, 99 something percent. It's all talk. They say that because they're trying to scare us. They say that because they're trying to scare a child. Because you scare a child, they're not going to do it. And even if you're an adult, like whatever the situation is, if you're in domestic situations, there's so many different things going on. I know you've talked about that a lot too, with everything going on with the domestic abuse. Yeah. I've heard, the girl who was just barely, who she's connected with people I went to school with, and she was just killed. She posted something on her feed 2 days before I posted that thing where I posted about if you need to get out of the situation, message me about having hand soaps or whatever. I wrote this whole thing, I've reposted this whole thing about it. And it was like the day after, 2 days after that they found out that she had been murdered. And she posted something about it, and then it was a murder-suicide. Or, there's lots of different situations, a child is being abused and can't get out of it. Just take the risk and get help. Ask for it. Also, get a circle of people that you can be safe with after, because you don't want to be by yourself. If you are going through some type of trauma and you decide to report it or something, be in a safe environment. Even if the person gets arrested. Yeah, even if the person gets arrested or goes away or whatever the situation is, be in a safe place, because your mind is going to try to play tricks on you, and it's going to make you think that you made the wrong decision or that something's going to happen. And honestly,
speak out, you've never made the wrong decision, no matter what anybody says. It doesn't matter what they're threatening you with. Those, like I said,
what's the worst that can happen at that point? Because you're already in this bad situation. And honestly, I know it sounds kind of blunt saying that, but like, you're already in a really shitty situation. So what's the worst going to happen by asking for help? You know what I mean?
I feel like, the only thing I can think of is if someone's tormentor, abuser is telling them they're going to hurt other people.
Right.
They're not going to do it if you go to the right person. Go to a cop. Right. They know what they're doing. They know how to handle the situation. Yep. You're not going to let anyone get hurt. And you don't deserve this abuse.
Exactly. And like you said, even if they're threatening they're going to hurt other people, like I remember my stepdad always talking about how he would bury my brothers alive or kill my dad, all these things. And you're terrified. You're like, okay, they might do it. But again, if you go to the right people, you're good. There's so many different outlets out there that can help you, especially nowadays in our day and age. I wasn't lucky enough to be in, even though I'm like not that old or anything, but even though like from now to when all that stuff came out for me, the internet and everything has changed so much that if I only would have had the outlets that we have now. And so there's so many different resources. Seriously, reach out to me. I will get you help.
In a dark room, or me,
yes,
or anyone.
Yes, anyone who you feel like, okay, they'll make the call for me. Like I said, you can do a cryptic message. Hey, I'm messaging you about your hand soaps. Can you get me help? Or can you send it to me immediately? Or I need it I need it as soon as possible. Whatever the situation is, we can decode that enough to where we're like, okay, this person needs serious help. Exactly. So there's lots of different things that we can do to help you, and that there's people like me and Cassie and a ton of us that are in our group that are doing things like this that you can reach out to, and there's more people all the time. So yeah, that's the number one thing that I would say to the person is take a breath, be brave, and just go and tell somebody. That's the best thing that I will tell you, because that's something that I wish someone would have told me, is it's gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. If someone would have told me that when I was 10 or, when it first started, then I wouldn't have had to deal with it for so long. So that's definitely the advice I would give.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope that if anyone is out there needing help or in a really terrible situation, I really hope that they're listening to this today. Just tell us real quickly what you have going on, and obviously where we can follow you. I've said that's the
at Candle and Dark Room. I'm also Desi Garcia is my personal one, so either one. But yeah, Candle in a Dark Room is my number one page. And that's where I have the, resources. I'm always posting things for people. I have, lots of different things going on. But Candle in a Dark Room is not only a podcast. We've become an organization. And what I'm going to, I don't know. But yes, that's it. That's new. And so we are now going to, so here's exactly some of the things that Candle Dark Room is offering. So I will personally, or people close to my team, which there's only a few of us, there's not very many of us, people who've actually been through different types of trauma will go to court with victims, and we will be your advocates. So I will fly to wherever needed and across the country where, wherever is needed. I've been asked to go to New York, New Jersey, Texas, wherever, and I will go to court with you. I will walk you through what to prepare yourself for mentally before you go to court and face your perpetrator in court. I will talk to you after. I'm not going to just say, okay, good luck. You did the hard part. Have a good life. No, I am a healing coach, so I will walk you through the steps of healing through your trauma and starting the process of taking your life back and the power of your life back. I think that's the number one thing, that when people go through trauma and they finally have the courage to come out and tell somebody, it's okay, well, now what do I do? You know what I mean? And I remember that was the same feeling of, okay, well, now what? Like, my life's completely different. Everything's different. Like, what do I do?
The process takes a long time. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I'll help you find therapy. I find a safe place to live if that's something you need. There's so many different resources that I'll help you with, and my team will help you with. So that's one of the things. And like I said, I'm a healing coach. So I do one-on-one. I can do it virtually, in person, wherever you're located. But I do one-on-one healing it's called Healing Through Trauma. And I'll literally just go through, you have to get to the root of the problem, the root of the trauma to get, like I said, to get through it, you have to feel it. And it's hard. It's not easy, but I promise the people I've done it with already, and I'm actually doing it right now with a couple people, the change it does from the inside out, not the outside in, is what's going to affect your life. And so, that's some of the things I'm doing. And then there's more things that, we're trying to put into place, but that is
I can imagine.
Yes.
Try to at least just that feeling of freedom once it's out and we've accepted, and everything stems from just acceptance, which is self-love. And wow, that's so cool that you do that. And and then, of course, my podcast, which I interview survivors. If you've been through any type of trauma, and it doesn't have to be sexual trauma, it doesn't have to be domestic violence, there's other things. I've interviewed people who have lost, I interviewed somebody who lost her husband to suicide. I interviewed a girl who lost her dad to suicide when she was in high school. Now the effects of that put on her, of dealing, obviously that traumatized her. I've interviewed people who have seen things, you name it. If you've been through a trauma, I would love to hear your story. So send me a message on @Candle and Dark Room. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and I would love to do interview with you. If you're not in person, again, there's
lots of different ways that we can do it. So
I love that so much. I love what you're doing. You're doing such
thank
good work.
you.
So much for this work you're doing. It's
Thank you
so,
so much for having me.
oh my God. So grateful. You are just, the word warrior keeps coming to my mind because you are
Thank you.
a beautiful one at that, and just such a fighter. And you're such an inspiration to me.
Thank you so much.
And
And one last thing that I do want to say is also, if you go to my page, I have a link tree, and we are asking if anybody can donate anything, because the money that is donated is going to helping the victims of trauma. Like I said, I help them get to their locations of where they need to go, like for court, because a lot of times family isn't helpful. So if they need to fly somewhere or they need to go somewhere, transportation. Also, I help people get into treatment, find a place to live, like I said, that's safe afterwards. There's lots of different things that we use that for. So if you can donate anything, that would be super helpful. It doesn't come to me or us personally. It is for 100% our organization. So
okay, cool. That's very important. Very good to know.
Yes.
I have one last question for you.
Okay.
If you can go back and tell, it could be anything that comes to your mind, child Desi, young Desi, one thing, what would you tell her?
That's hard. So I would tell her that to keep hanging on, to not give up, to not hurt herself because he's hurting her, and to love who she truly is inside and out. Because even though people make you feel worthless and ugly, that one day you're going to use what you have to offer, and you're going to hopefully change the world. So
yes, you will. I love it. Oh my God, that's so sweet. I love it.
I did write a letter to my younger self. If you look on my Instagram page, it's me when I was younger. I was like probably 10 or 11, and I wrote a letter to my younger self. And so yeah, go and read that, because I think that was very. I have actually, but people I do the course with write themselves a letter to their younger self, because I think it's super important. So.
Keep fighting. You're worth it. I love you. Like, I want to hug you.
Yep.
You're important. You're special. Don't let that person hurt you. Don't let those words affect you. Tell somebody out. Like, it's just goes to show just how important it is to hang on, because there always is that light, and future you is going to be so appreciative.
But you can save yourself, and you can do that. So just look deep inside yourself and find that courage, even if it's just a little bit of courage that you have. Like I said, I literally remember taking a breath. Okay, this is what's happening. You know what I mean? And just do it. Just literally just let something take over you and just do it. And I promise, I have never met a survivor that has regretted telling somebody and asking for help.
Just break the silence.
Exactly.
Honor that shit.
So.
Like Desi to help you. You have Buddha Bullying. You have Candle in the Dark Rooms, a new organization. There's so many outlets. You can Google. There are hotlines. We are here for you. You are never, ever, ever alone in anything you feel, think. Like, don't ever allow yourself to feel alienated. We've all been through something, and you are not going through anything that somebody in this world hasn't gone through. You're not crazy. You're not going to be ashamed for it, no matter what anyone has ever told you. You just, if that's the case, you were going to the wrong people, because you are so loved and you are not alone. So thank you, Desi, for being on today and sharing your story. You are just incredible. I don't have enough words.
Thank you.
I just admire you so much, and everything you do and stand for, and the way you speak out on something that's a really hard thing and very vulnerable subject.
Right.
But I just know it's going to help so many people. So thank you for being so open.
Yes, thank you.
I love you.
Well, and like I said, thank you for having me on here and giving people this platform to talk about it, because there's so many different things that people need to talk about that has to do with, the subject. So thank you for doing that. And also thank you for letting this be a safe place and feel comfortable, because I think that's another huge part of people sharing their story, is to make sure you feel safe to do so. So thank you. And I love you and I appreciate you.
I love you. Thank you. Yes, guys, you're always safe. DM me if you have questions. DM Buddha Bullying. DM Desi. We're here for you. We're a safe space.